Welcome. I'm Susan Young, Mindful Coaching. And we spent the month of December exploring love. We started engaging around compassion. And when I was reflecting and meditating on the next wave for us, what came up for me was a deep sense of wholeness. And what that includes is that sense of how do we hold all the parts of ourselves? You may have heard of the internal family systems. I've mentioned that before by Dr. Richard Schwartz. It's a common tool used in voice dialogue years before. There's a sense of different parts of ourselves inside. We might have an angry part. We might have a part that we've exiled because we don't like it. We might have a part that controls and manages ourselves and all the things that are going on, or we have a protective part. There's many different ways. The more trauma or addiction that we've experienced, the more mental health, the more complex these systems are. Over time, though, we can heal. We can heal and come back into touching into a deeper sense of wholeness. Now, I'm going to use the word internal sanctuary. And if the word sanctuary has any religious overtones for you, translate it into something that fits for you. It doesn't for me. There's something called the Babelfish that those of you who are science fiction aficionados may remember. Babelfish was used in The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, and it's like a hearing aid. You put it in your ear, you travel off to another galaxy, and you speak to another alien species. And you say, "Hello, my name is Susan." And the other alien species says, only hears blah, blah, blah. But they put a Babelfish in and they hear, "Hi, my name's Susan." And they come back into a different language and they hear, "Hi." Kind of what Google does for us sometimes now. So I'm going to invite you to any language that has spiritual or religious overtones. If that doesn't fit for you, it doesn't have to. But I invite you to consider sanctuary as a place you can land inside your own being. And it's part of our wholeness. Because by creating an internal sanctuary, that we can come into deep compassion for ourselves, for all the parts of ourselves, some of which we don't always like. When we act out, when we hurt others, when we feel angry, when we explore things that we don't, jealous, bitter, envy, darkness, despair, sorrow. I have felt pretty flat in the last week. I'm sure some of you have felt that too, with the shenanigans going down in the South and the coup d'etat that's happened we're witnessing democracy being demolished before us. And along with other personal and family stuff, sometimes I can feel like that's too much. And I can feel my old rage come back up. And so I want to feel whole and well. And I do that by creating an inner sanctuary where all parts of myself are welcome. Not always an easy task, because sometimes we want to banish those parts of it. So I'm going to read you a poem by Rosemary Watola Tromer. Is it helpful if I share my screen so you can read the reading while I'm reading it? People like that? Okay. So let's going to make this a little bit bigger. It's more a reading than a poem, but she's a poet. Okay, so I'm going to share my screen. Here we go. So Rosemary Watola Tromer says, can you see it okay? Yep. I can make this a little larger. And I can do 200%. There we go. Okay. So Rosemary Watola Tromer says, "I'm sorry, I thought banishing you was the way to become better, more perfect, more good, more free, the irony. I thought if I cut you off and cast you out, if I built the walls high enough, then the parts left would be more whole. As if the sweet orange doesn't need the toughened rind, the bitter seed, as if the forest doesn't need the blue fury of fire. It didn't work, did it, the exile? You were always here, jangling the hinges, banging at the door, whispering through the cracks. Left to myself, I wouldn't have no one to take down the walls, nor would I have had the strength to do so. That act of grace, that act was grace disguised as disaster. But know that the walls are rubble. It is also grace that teaches me to want to embrace you, grace that guides me to be gentle, even with the part of me that would still try to exile any other part. It is grace that invites me to name all parts beloved. How honest it all is, how human. I promise to keep learning how to know you as my one, to practice opening to what at first feels unwanted, meet it with understanding, trust all belongs, welcome you home. So what I loved about that, it's similar to the guest house, those of you that are familiar with Rumi's reading, is that sense of, I had a thought last week, I wish the government would be toppled. I wish that democracy was still possible in the States. And I've really struggled with what's happening politically, and I bring that into my internal self, and I feel a sense of despair and hopelessness with all that is. And I don't want that part. I want to practice, joy, meditation. I want to do a spiritual bypass. I want to skip over the rage, the loss, the anger. I've had it before, the bitterness, the jealousy, the envy, the darkness. So I'm inviting us as part of a compassionate exploration to deepen into being willing to accept all parts of ourselves. And in that comes compassion for ourselves. And then out of that comes the possibility or a more capacity for social justice, reaching for social justice. As Canada's kind of showing up, Canada's like really coming together, which is a surprising outcome of this, what's going on in the States. So I'm grateful for that. Yeah, let's see. So in the closing, the spiritual imperative for radical inclusion and compassion is to gather in community and welcome ourselves and to accept that no part is unacceptable. So the deepening into a resource creative essence of ourselves, however you imagine that. So underneath that sense of a deep feeling of wholeness, no matter what experiences we have, and welcome them all. And from this place, we can move in the world with less what I experience as anger and rage as a young woman, which I had a lot of, and came out into the world with my dukes up, getting them down. And that might be a time and place, a stage and age when you're in your 20s and seeing the horrors of the world. But then to come back as we get older, to come from a place of calmness and wholeness. So thanks for joining me for this. Okay.